doing animated GIFs. They just went crazy. So the class started to explode before it even started. And one of the things I started to think about is we have this entire momentum moving in before we ever meet our students. And once we met our students, there was about 150 to 200 people who potentially would comment and read their work. So what we had done is we had used our network and the network at large to create an experience for our students that when they come into this class, immediately there's an open, connected network that I am not going to be a single node in, nor is Martha. We're going to be one amongst many. And the work they do is going to reverberate throughout this network. So I'm going to hand it over to Martha. I have more thoughts, but I'm going to hand it over to Martha and show you to some degree how we designed the site, ds106, and then how it kind of came in as a course that was open, connected, and very much social, and moved away from the disconnection that often can happen with the course, although not always.
So about, I also want to preface all of this by saying this was my first time teaching. So if you can imagine trial by fire, this is it. Going into this semester, I didn't really know what the heck I was doing, and Jim decided that he was going to invite the whole world to take ds106. And what started happening very quickly as people participated is, as Jim said, people were coming up with assignment ideas, partly because we were saying, hey, do you have cool assignment ideas? And people did. And we said, at one point, we have to figure out how to capture this stuff and use it, because this is really rich and this is really interesting and valuable for us as well as for anybody who's interested in digital storytelling and interested in using these technologies to kind of communicate meaning and teach students how to do that. So we came up with this idea of an assignment repository. So basically, this is the ds106 website, which is a pretty straightforward blog site. When you come here, you just see the latest posts from across the network. All of the users on this site have registered on this blog, so they have their little avatar that shows up, and they have a kind of a blurb of the post. And then if you click continue reading, what it actually does is take you to their site, wherever that may be. And it's not here. It's hosted wherever they want to. But we decided we wanted to have a way for people to submit an assignment. So we threw together a Google form. And it's very straightforward. Give it a title, give it a description, put it in one of these categories that we had set up for the course: visual, audio, video, mashup, fanfic, design, writing, and web. And if you have an example of what it might look like, let us know what it is. If you want to tell us who you are, give us your name. And that was it. And then what would happen, actually, on the back end, if anybody cares, this is a Google form, so this gets ingested into a Google spreadsheet. Where it then can be exported in a variety of different formats. So what I did is I was able to take the data in that spreadsheet and pull it back into the course blog. And every assignment became a post on the blog then. And as it was coming in, I was able to assign particular categories to each post so that I could then do interesting things in terms of the presentation of those assignments as they were coming in. So to give you an example, this is the visual design category, and each of these little boxes with a gray header is an assignment that was submitted by somebody on the course. You see the title, you see the description. If there is a screenshot or an image associated, you can see that. And then as the assignments were coming in, categories were assigned to them. In this case, so visual assignments all have the category visual assignments, but they also have a unique category, visual assignments 24. And what we told students who are playing along on the class is, if you're going to do this assignment on your blog, use that category. And then when we pull your posts into the course blog, we now can find all of the people who did this assignment as well. So not only can we see the assignments that were submitted, we can see the submissions to the assignment. Does that make sense? And to give you an idea of what that looks like, we get to this level where this is a great assignment too. This was actually submitted by one of Jim's students. And the idea is to use it's stories written in Windows Media Player or iTunes, any music player that you might have on your computer. And the idea is look at your music library on your computer, the titles of those songs, and write a story, a narrative out of those titles. And this was Sarah, right? Who submitted?
This was Colleen Tracy.
This was another student. So she put up this assignment like fairly early on in the class.
Yeah, they did it on their own. We didn't even prod them.
And people loved it. People loved this assignment. So if you scroll down on the actual assignment page, each of these is a submission that people made to this assignment. And the posts will take you back to their blog post where you can see the completion of this assignment. And we had some students in our classes do this, but we also had lots of people all over the world actually do this assignment because it really resonated with people. They really liked this the idea of this assignment. So we were able to basically on the website use the presentation of this information to help foster that community and help build that community. As of last week, I think we have 125 assignments that have been submitted over the course of the semester. And we've been talking about how to make those available. I mean, you can come and you can see them here on the web page, but we'd also like to make those available in some kind of open format so that anybody who's teaching a digital storytelling class or any class that might use digital storytelling as a component can kind of scan these assignments and see if there's one that they could use or tweak or modify for their own purposes. So it not only did this end up being a huge component of our class, but we feel like what we've actually ended up generating is this repository of assignments and ideas for faculty anywhere who are interested in these kinds of activities.
Yeah, that's amazing. And one of the things that happened as a result is students, Colleen, for example, put in this assignment. And 55 people, some from Indonesia, some from Portugal, all over the world did her assignment. What does that say? And Colleen comes and she looks and she was saying, like, I couldn't believe. Once I saw 5, I was amazed. Once I saw 50, I was blown away. And it's interesting to put them in a situation to come up with something creative that other people can do and then the community. Because then we had Jordan Kroll take that assignment and say, okay, do that, but then use Flickr images to create the narrative visually. They were building and mashing up each other's assignments. Well, one of the other side effects that we never dreamed of with this class that came out and kind of blew my mind, and there's two things I want to talk about. The first is ds106 Radio. ds106 Radio is interesting because come week 1, we had done some planning in December. Come week 1, there was no radio. Come week 2, I put out a Twitter message basically like, you know what ds106 Radio needs? ds106 needs a radio station. Because I didn't want to use Illuminate at all. I hate all things Blackboard. Illuminate's part of Blackboard. People are like, you should do a synchronous session using Illuminate. And I was like, oh, no, I will not. And so what we basically said is, what is another way? And Grant Potter, who lives in who lives in Canada, in BC, northern BC, saw my tweet on the radio. He was part of the open class, and this guy is a genius. He went and he got the server together, and he said, hey, I got a radio station for ds106. It's like, what? He's like, I have a radio station for ds106. Here's how you use it. He gave me all the credentials. He set up a Dropbox so anyone could upload whatever they wanted. It would go into Auto DJ, and regularly we had a 24/7 radio station, which we then changed our syllabus to have students create radio shows over the course of the semester. It was mind-blowing. Well, that radio station became a whole nother platform for us to think about how to use mobile devices, how to use our own computers as broadcasting, and it changed my relationship to how I was thinking about the technology. I'd been so blog-centric. And when Grant Potter came and we opened this course, it changed my whole idea about how I've been approaching all this stuff. Well, build on what Grant Potter did. Week 7, Tim Owens, who's actually in the audience today, was like, well, if we could do radio, why can't we do TV? And so Tim Owens went behind the scenes, and he actually designed a ds106 TV station that people started to do live. And what's amazing is the synchronicity. At the same time, Andy Rush had been designing a kit for UMW, DTLT, and also for the University Relations. So it's actually for the University Relations Department, but DTLT doesn't want to give it up. And it basically was a series of video equipment that was cheap, that was using a Mac and this application called Wirecast so that we could do professional-like TV shows and put them out into the ds106 environment. This all happened around the world. Close to home, as in Farmville, or even here at DTLT, but also in UBC, in Indonesia, in Portugal.
Talk about Scott.
And people, Scott Lowe. So the other thing about ds106 Radio is you all know what happened in Japan. Well, we had an American expat in Tokyo.
Who's the first podcaster in Japan.
First podcaster ever, who found out about ds106 Radio from Alan Levine's blog and was interested because he's a radio guy. Well, he actually was doing a radio class in Tokyo, and he said, you know what, I want to get on the radio. He brought his class on our radio, and then him and his students reported on the after effects of the earthquake in Japan live to the community of ds106. And it was amazing that we were starting to get field reports from Australia. We had Peter Rowan, or Rowan Peter, who goes out with his iPod or his iPhone. He goes out and he says, this is what the crickets sound like in Melbourne. Yeah,
didn't
and
he? Yeah.
we started to get these experiences by opening it up that changed everyone's ideas of storytelling. Now, if you ask me what digital storytelling is, I can't tell you. And that's an important part of this class. We are so much more kind of thinking about the fragments of narrative and creativity that make a story that we maybe don't see, but actually fills in the holes of some of the ways we've been thinking about it. And Martha and I were talking about this yesterday when we heard Michael Wesch talk about this idea of production, this idea of media, this idea of reframing the experience for the student in your class. DS106, in many ways, we hadn't theorized it like that. We were purely experimenting, but it goes to the heart of that. We wanted to put the camera, the audio, the video, the web stories, like his forum about his example about WeForum. Remember that awesome example where there was a total copycat site that someone had gone out and made even better? Yeah. That was an assignment that Martha Burtis, who's right here, I'll let her talk about. Martha Burtis, you know her, right? She came up with, and we had students who had no skills taking the New York Times site and creating an alternative site. This was during the Japanese earthquake. One of the students basically did a whole series of events that said everything's fine, right? The recession's over, there's no earthquake. It was like this sunny version of the New York Times where everything in the world seemed fine. And when the students realized that they could intervene in the media and make it their own and subvert, it changed so much of how we thought about this. And the fact is how are we using the other media? Why aren't we, and then I'll hand it over, why aren't we as universities using something like web radio or web TV to show what's happening at this community? One of the things that came up in the workshop Tom Woodward did today is we don't know what's happening in other classes. We don't know what other people are doing. You know what? It costs us nothing, a little bit of time, to sit down with a faculty member and say, hey, what are you doing in your class? Make a TV show out of it. Why don't you and your students create content for the TV station that UNW has? Create content for the radio station that UNW has. Why don't we use these two platforms as a teaching and learning tool? They're very cheap, and they're very powerful. UNW can be its own media mogul, right? We can use the media. We can control the vertical and the horizontal.
I'm just pulling up. I got to log Andy Rush out because he doesn't remember to log himself out. So I'm going to put the mic down a second so I can log in. One of the things that we did at the end of the year, because we know people like to do data analysis, because it's all about the numbers, really. Yeah. Well, we did one thing. We did something early on in the semester. We put up a Google form called DS106 Wants Your Stats, and we sent it out to people who were playing in the open DS106. And this is kind of a cool thing. Not a lot of people know you can do this, but when you pull in data into a Google spreadsheet, Google Spreadsheets actually has a built-in widget that allows you to very easily map that data. So we put together a DS106 map. The information is unencrypted, and I need to approve that. It takes a little while to load because it's a little bit data heavy. But what it does is it shows us kind of where all over the world the people who were following along, who answered the form, are located. So that was kind of a cool thing. And then we decided, so there they are. You can see them. There's a lot of people in North America, obviously, but we also have some in Europe, some in Australia, over in Indonesia and in Japan. But we also put together, where is it? DS106 by numbers. So we put together this Google Doc towards the end of the semester, because one of the things we didn't really get into that we wanted to have our students do was infographics. And we kind of had an idea that maybe we'd have them do this as the final exam, but they all wanted to make movie posters about Jim Groom instead. So, but we do have these numbers, and I do think they're pretty impressive. So I'll show this to you, and then we'll open it up for any questions. The total posts over the course of the semester between my section, Jim's two sections, and all of the people playing along, where we had, as of noon on 4/27, was 3,530 posts that had been aggregated into the course site. Total comments, which we also were able to track because of some magic that we did with with Yahoo Pipes, was about 7,087 comments. There were 2,093 categories that people had used, or tags that they had used to identify their content. One of Jim's students, this guy Aaron, actually got really into analyzing the data for ds106 radio. So he was actually able to tell us the number of live radio occurrences, which basically just means somebody had logged in and taken the stream and done a live show. It could have been 5 minutes, it could have been an hour, but it gives us some idea. And there were 64